So I would like to introduce Senator John Laird. John Laird was elected to the state Senate on November 3rd, 2020, carrying all 4 counties in the district, and was sworn in to represent Senate District 17 on December 7th, 2020. Senator Laird serves on a number of committees in the Senate, including but not limited to Chair of the Senate Budget Subcommittee Number 1, Education, Vice Chair of the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and the Natural Resources and Water Committee. Prior to his Senate service, he served as Secretary of the California Natural Resources Agency under Jerry Brown from 2011 until January 2019. He was on the board of State Integrated Waste Management Board from 2008 to 2009. He was elected to the State Assembly representing the 27th District, which included portions of Monterey, Santa Clara, and Santa Cruz counties from 2002 through 2008, serving 3 terms in the Assembly. He was on the Board of Trustees of Cabrillo College, and he was elected to the Santa Cruz City Council and was a 2-term mayor from 1983 to 1984, and again, 1987 to 1988. He's making him one of the first openly gay mayors to serve in California. He has served as executive director for the Santa Cruz AIDS Project and has taught environmental policy at the University of California in Santa Cruz. So Senator Laird, we are so honored to have you joining us today, and we look forward to hearing what you have to tell us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ann. I really appreciate that. About the only advantage of the pandemic is that I can Zoom to San Luis Obispo and then immediately Zoom to Sacramento afterwards and not have to do the 4-hour and 10-minute drive in between. And I miss being there. I miss seeing you all. I scrolled through and saw who's there. There are a lot of friends on this call. There's one additional elected official. I saw that Erica Stewart from the San Luis Obispo City Council was on, but you acknowledged everyone. And I thought I'd just say, I know that I get to talk for a bit and then have a brief time for questions. I look forward to that. I've been a League of Women Voters member in the Santa Cruz chapter for decades and worked very closely with them. You did a good job of listing some of my committees. The Pro Tem appointed me to 9 standing committees, which I was flattered with, but which means it's a big workload. And so when I looked at your priorities, they'll come through almost every single committee. Water and climate will be in natural resources. Police reform will be in judiciary. So there'll be plenty of places that we can communicate and make sure that we act together. Also, Clint Wyrick is the first employee in the San Luis Obispo office. He's on, and I just acknowledge how difficult it's been to set up 4 offices without being able to go in them, and how difficult it has been to put together a staff that can't be in the same place. And yet we're hitting the ground running, and I look forward to working with you. I thought I'd go through a few issues, because one of the issues I noticed that among your priorities is climate. And one of the issues I have to work on just out the gate is the issue of fire. And let's just acknowledge climate change is happening, whether it's 120 degrees in San Luis Obispo on Labor Day weekend, or there's 17 or 18 inches of rain on Chalk Mountain, or the road washes out in Big Sur. Is just an indication of the extremes of climate that we're facing. And with fire, where I'm sitting at home in Santa Cruz, we had a rather horrific fire in August that burned within 2 miles of here. Resources were so stretched because 1 million acres were burning at once that we just had our city fire department at the city limits. So one big wind and it would have been in. It never occurred to me in a coastal town with fog and a temperate weather that I would have to be packed and ready to go. And 925 homes were lost in that fire. And so when the more global way to talk about this is from the mid 1920s to 2000, 1,000,000 acres burned in California. Total of 1,000,000 acres. 1,000,000 acres burned in the first week of the firestorm in August, equal to what had burned in 75 years in California. And that ended up being 4,000,000 acres. And what happened is there was an ethic in this state of fire suppression, just completely put fires out. And as a result, there's been a fuels buildup across the state, and it's butted up against a changing climate. I was still Resources Secretary at the time of the Paradise Fire, and that fire moved at 60 acres a minute. 60 acres a minute. There was a reason that people could not outrun that fire. And so when I was Resources Secretary, we started to change the direction of how we thought about fire in California. We did the first forest carbon plan of the 50 states. And we started 6 units of CAL FIRE that were just for prescribed fire or controlled burns. We targeted 250,000 acres a year for fuels preparation. We really incented that. Gavin Newsom has doubled down on that. He has increased the goal for prescribed fire and the funding. He's increased the amount of acres that are treated. He has an amazing amount of budget money proposed in this budget. But part of the problem is I think 96% of it goes to CAL FIRE and 4% to local fire safe councils or local departments, and we have to bust that open. So I am exploring, and I hope to introduce a piece of legislation that basically says we're going to have a roadmap for the next 10 years of fire in California. We're going to target a certain number of acres every year for prescribed fire, a certain number of acres for forest and fuels management treatment. We're going to include local entities so that that is really spread around to where it is, and actually have a target to reach rather than doing it in a haphazard way that's year to year. And there's so many other ways that climate will come up. In both my home area and your area and throughout the district, sea level rise is going to be a big issue. We did the science that said, here are the estimates about where it will be in future years, and here's the guidance to local governments of some of the things that they have to do. But we're going to have to go much further and prescribe certain things and look for certain funding sources. And it looks like there is a resiliency bond that stands a good chance of coming out of the legislature and go on next year's ballot that would target fire and other things. And given how big the issue is, it'll barely touch it, but it'll start to seed what needs to be done in different places. And there's one remaining issue that's climate-based, and that is that all across my Senate district and across California, homeowners are losing their fire insurance. And to be honest, the 2 committees in the Assembly and the Senate are wholly owned subsidiaries of the insurance company and industry. So we're going to have to look at ways that might be done regulatorily. And there might be a deal that if people harden their houses for fire prevention, that's in exchange for fire insurance being guaranteed. But if that's the case, that cost is so astronomical, we're going to have to work with either tax credits or grants or different things to allow people to be able to do that, because 25% of Californians live in high fire hazard zones. And that is a big challenge. I also saw that you were targeting working on water as one of your issues. That's something I've worked on my entire career. And when I was Resources Secretary, we adopted as a state the first time there was a groundwater management scheme in California. We were the last state in the West to do that. As I was always fond of saying, whenever we're behind Texas on an environmental issue, we should scratch our heads. And so that was enacted in 2014, and now the big issue is implementing it. And it is a major issue, obviously, in the northern part of San Luis Obispo County. And the goal by 2040 is for every stressed water basin in California to only be taking out of it every year what goes into it. And it's going to require more conservation, some additional water sources, many things to get there, but we have to get there because the last drought showed groundwater tables across California dropping dramatically. And in the Central Valley, it showed subsidence. The ground level was actually sinking as this was out. And that's nothing that you can restore. So we have to curb this before it continues to happen, because in those places, there are bridges that are sinking on one side. It's happening under aqueducts and canals. It is happening where it's really challenging roadways. It is going to be a big issue. And our strategy was all of the above with water sources, that we needed to do some more storage, much more conservation. We needed to do much more water recycling. We had to incent in every part of this. And the water bond in 2014 was actually designed for the first time. It wasn't a collection of earmarks. It was designed around certain parts of that plan, and people had to prove that they would develop or save water to be able to be eligible for money from that. So we were actually creating water or lowering demand out of that bond. And that's what we have to continue to do. And there's certain pieces of it that are very controversial. Desal is still very controversial because of intakes that take in marine life, and because of the disposal of brine, and because of the high energy use that comes with it. And as we move to renewables, it might be more affordable. And just certain places that are on the coast that have no other option that really are looking to that. But that's an issue. And then I also saw in your priorities, and was pleased to see, that you really had voting rights and participation there. I voted in the Rules Committee and on the floor this week to confirm Shirley Weber as Secretary of State. And she gave a powerful testimony to the Rules Committee as we were considering her about the fact that she was raised in Arkansas, that they had to leave Arkansas because her father was being threatened with lynching, but that her father and grandparents had never voted. They just had never voted. She's African American. They were never allowed to vote or permitted to vote. And that she appreciates guaranteeing of that. And at the federal level, I am heartened to see that they're looking to guarantee voting rights for federal elections, and local elections will follow. And I hope that they have enough votes to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act that would, in fact, eliminate some of these things, like people waiting 11 hours in line in Georgia and having one drop-off mailbox for a county of 4 million in Texas. We have to get at that in California. We have to continue the march, because making voting more accessible in this last election led to the highest turnout that we have had since Harry Truman. And in the Senate district, it was 82%. And there were some drop-offs from president, which means the turnout throughout the Senate district was probably 83 or 84%. So what did we do? We did it right. We allowed flexible mail voting and other things, and we just passed a bill that we hope goes to the governor to extend that for the special elections this year. And I think we will look at whether or not we do that coming up. And lastly, let me just say before questions that you have your share of local issues, whether it's Oceana Dunes and the OHV Park, which is about to come to a head at the Coastal Commission. And I'm waiting to see what the precise recommendations are from the Coastal Commission, but I'm expecting to support them as opposed to the parks plan that's been released. Diablo Canyon is closing, and I've talked to Supervisor Legg about it, who's on the call. And that's going to be dramatic in 4 years at the displacement and the effect on the one school district whose property tax revenues has a huge share that comes from Diablo Canyon. So that is something over the next 4 years we really have to work on. And Bill Monning did a great job in getting a hard to pass bill passed and to provide transition funding for that. And then, as obscure as it is, I'm working with the finance department and may have to introduce a bill for the city of Atascadero on the fact that they loaned money to their redevelopment agency, and when it was shut down, they were never paid back. And it's really not fair for a city that small. And I'm going to try to get the administration to rectify and pay back those loans. And if they don't, I'm going to introduce a bill that tries to do exactly that. So with that, I know we have 5 or 6 or 7 minutes left, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I'm sorry that that presentation was sort of a Federal Express version of going through.
We have a lot of national forests in our state, and so I'm curious as to how the state and the federal government interact in terms of preserving or taking care of the national forests, in terms of, because lightning strikes and all kinds of stuff happen in the forest.
Great question, because if you look at California's forests, 58% are in federal jurisdiction and 2% are in state jurisdiction, and the rest are privately held. And so under President Trump, when he was busy saying we weren't taking care of our forests, he had more forests in California and they were not being taken care of at all. And in fact, they were many of the major fires in the last year or two have been in federal forests, the one by Yosemite, the one by Trinity, and the others. So when the Brown administration actually negotiated what we call good neighbor agreements, which allowed us to come on federal lands and do fuels management and preparation if they weren't doing it. And what I'm really hoping is that the new administration will step up to their recognition of what they have to do. And we're really prepared to work with them at the state level, because that's where a lot of the issues are. That's a short answer, but that's sort of.
That's good. At least you're doing something to cooperate. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
I saw Jan Marks waving her hand.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just curious what's happening with your efforts to improve passenger rail service north from the city of San Luis Obispo all the way up to the Bay Area.
I was guessing that that was going to be your question. And so I've already done a couple of Zooms with people as part of meet and greets where I've raised it as an issue. I did it with the Monterey transportation people because they have a common interest in it going through. I did it with the head of high-speed rail, since they have to improve the northern part of that line to be part of high-speed rail if it goes through. And I said, and if you really want to be complementary with the places on the coast and what you're doing, you have to restore train service there. So I have started to seed it with people, and I'm supposed to be having a Zoom sometime in the next month with the head of Caltrans, and I intend to raise it with them. And I did raise it with, I also had a Zoom with the San Luis Obispo countywide agency that is the COG that also does transportation planning, and said, I'm really interested in this. I'm going to try to have meetings and link it with state and other agencies in North South. And I would love to know from you what you think we could do and what the next steps are to try to move on that. So that's what I've done in 6 weeks. And I hope that there's a chance to really have a tangible agenda and be able to do it.
Thank you.
And Jan, you should know that I invoked your name in almost anybody that if they got a letter from the city of San Luis Obispo.
Thank you.
I know what the impetus was.
Okay.
I know we're at the ending time in a minute. Is there one last quick question before I go?
Well, here's just a personal question from just a point of interest from John Ashbaugh. have you gotten your COVID vaccination yet?
I haven't, but I am potentially getting one in the next week or two. They're working on it. I'm of the appropriate age group, and I was really serious about not stepping out of line unless it was my turn. And so now that they called my age group, I'm trying to get it scheduled. And my 96-year-old mother was vaccinated yesterday, finally.
Oh, good.
So first things first. And I should mention just in passing that I'm in the middle of the negotiations of the governor's school reopening proposal. And the teacher's position has really hardened to many of them don't want to be back in the classroom until they're vaccinated. And so we are really pressuring. We're pressuring for fair vaccines distribution. And I've been in touch with San Luis Obispo authorities. And we also need to have it go where the cases are. If the cases are in disadvantaged communities, then that's where the vaccine needs to go. If the cases, and they are in congregate settings for older people, then that's where the vaccines need to go. And so I'm working with other senators to try to get enough vaccine and try to make sure it goes to the right places. In any event, thank you. I really appreciate being here today. I look forward to seeing you all in person. And I know I don't have to ask you to stay in touch because I know a lot of you and you do. So thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much, Senator Laird. And we're looking forward to staying connected with you in the next months and years. And best wishes on your new term.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay.